This is a business that's transferring or transforming from an R&D entity into a commercial business that will be providing products that are approved in the US market within the next 12 months for launch, firstly in bone regeneration, but then importantly from surgical spacing and also in the scar prevention applications.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Tetra Therix CEO, Will Knox. Will, very good to meet you. For viewers view to Tetra Therix, could you briefly explain what the company does and what makes your technology so unique?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen. Look, Tetra Therix is an Australian biomedical business that's created a platform biomaterial that can be used for a range of different clinical and commercial applications that we're commercializing over the next few years. Recently IPO'd and have a very exciting future ahead of us for treating patients for a range of different clinical indications.
You mentioned that IPO and you raised $25 million through that IPO. What does this mean for the company's next phase of growth, Will?
Yeah, it's a very exciting next phase, Stephen, that we're going through. And the IPO was to really raise funds to help us transition from what we have been for many years, which is an R&D leader here in Australia, into more of a commercial, fully fledged business that's creating finished goods for use in the clinic over the next few years. And so the 25 million that we raised for the IPO will be used for a range of applications. But the main one really for us is to help fund that build of a new facility that will help us have commercial quantities of material of finished goods to cater for the supply and the demand that we've got coming through over the next few years in markets like America.
Will, your Tetra Matrix platform has wide applications. Which clinical areas are you targeting first, and when can we expect to see products in market?
Well, we do have a long pipeline of different platform applications, but in the first instance, for the near term, we've got five very specific products in three franchises that we're focusing on. Firstly, in bone regeneration, we're using the material to regenerate bone in both oral and facial applications, as well as orthopedics, so trauma and spinal fusion. So that's our bone regeneration franchise. We then have what's called tissue spacing franchise, where we've got two products where we're using, again, the same platform material that's used across the different applications to be used in two different clinical indications specifically. One is using the material to generate space around the prostate to help optimize radiation therapy for patients with prostate cancer. And then the other one is for ophthalmics, where we're using the material in cataract surgery and lens replacement in the eye. And then finally, our third franchise has a product we call Tetraderm, which is a product that can be used in surgical incision applications to prevent scars forming in those applications. So three very distinct franchises. The first applications for us in bone regeneration, as I mentioned, in dentistry and in orthopedics, will be hitting the market following FDA approval, we think, in the first half of 2026, where we'll get approval in the US market before we expand internationally.
Will, how does Tetra Matrix differ from traditional regenerative or implantable technologies in terms of patient outcomes, but also commercial potential?
Yeah, so look, from a differentiation perspective, the material is a synthetic polymer, so it is manufactured synthetically in lab. But despite that, there is a very minimal inflammatory response to the product itself, which means that the body, it essentially doesn't recognize that it's there, and the product can come into the body, it can do its thing, it can regenerate tissue or create space, but then naturally and safely resorb into the body with no inflammatory or fibrotic issues. So that safety profile is something that really differentiates the product. Physically, the material itself is delivered as a liquid at room temperature, but importantly, it's been deliberately designed to then transfer or transform into a chewing gum-like consistency once it hits physiologic temperature of 37 degrees. So that means that the product can be delivered minimally invasively through syringes or through needles for a range of different applications in both in and outpatient settings.
Will, looking ahead, what are the key milestones investors should be watching out for over the next 12 to 18 months?
Look, as you can imagine, with five very distinct products that are across the platform, we have clinical, commercial, and partnership announcements and milestones across all of those. So when you start to overlay those five opportunities, we do have quite a constant stream of news forecasted for the next 12 months. Importantly, though, as I mentioned before, this is a business that's transferring or transforming from an R&D entity into a commercial business that will be providing products that are approved in the US market within the next 12 months for launch, firstly in bone regeneration, but then importantly from surgical spacing and also in the scar prevention applications, the clinical data to prove in the clinical setting that the product can perform as we intend it to will also be very important milestones for the platform.
Well, I hope you'll keep us updated with your progress. Thank you very much for the introduction today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Will Knox, the CEO of TetraTherics.